The rain was hitting hard against the windshield as David pulled his black sedan into the small parking lot. He wasn't supposed to be here. His driver was sick today, and David had decided to drive himself to the important business meeting in Seattle. But somewhere along the highway he felt this overwhelming need to stop. Maybe it was the stress, or maybe it was another one of those sleepless nights that had been haunting him for 18 long years. The small diner looked like it hadn't been updated since the 1980s. Red vinyl booths, checkered floors, and the smell of coffee and bacon filling the air. David straightened his expensive suit jacket and walked inside. He felt completely out of place among the truck drivers and local workers having their morning breakfast. A young woman approached his table with a coffee pot in her hand. She looked to be in her early 20s, with shoulder-length dark hair, pulled back in a simple ponytail. Her uniform was clean but well-worn, and there was something about her smile that reminded David of someone he once knew. Someone he had lost. "Good morning. Coffee to start?" she asked cheerfully, her voice warm and friendly despite the early hour. David nodded, still lost in his thoughts. As she reached across the table to fill his cup, her sleeve rolled up slightly. That's when David saw it. His heart nearly stopped beating. There, on the inside of her wrist, was a crescent-shaped scar. It was about an inch long, curved like a tiny moon, and positioned exactly where his daughter had the same mark. The coffee, cup in David's hand, started shaking. He set it down quickly, trying to control his breathing. The young waitress noticed his sudden change and looked concerned. "Sir, are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost," she said, her brow furrowed with genuine worry. David forced himself to look up at her face, really look at her. The shape of her eyes, the way she tilted her head when she was concerned, even the small dimple on her left cheek. It was like looking at a reflection of memories he had tried so hard to bury. I'm fine," David managed to say, though his voice came out rougher than intended. "Just tired from the drive." The waitress smiled sympathetically. "Long road trips can be exhausting. Where are you heading?" "Seattle," David replied, studying her face. "Business meeting. What about you? Have you lived around here long?" She shifted the coffee pot to her other hand and relaxed slightly. "Most of my life, actually. I was adopted when I was little and grew up here in Oregon. It's a quiet place, but I love it. The people are kind and it feels like home." The word adopted hit David like a punch to the stomach. He gripped the edge of the table, trying to stay calm. "Adopted? That's wonderful that you found a good family." "Oh yes, my grandmother is amazing. She's been taking care of me since I was 12. My adoptive parents died in a car accident, but Grandma stepped in. She's getting older now, so I work double shifts to help with her medical bills and make sure she's comfortable." David's mind was racing. The timeline could fit: the adoption, the age, the scar. But he needed to be careful. He couldn't just blurt out his suspicions to this young woman who was simply trying to do her job. "That's very admirable of you," David said, pulling out his phone. "Family is everything. Can I get some breakfast, maybe pancakes?" "Of course. Our pancakes are homemade and they're really popular. Would you like bacon or sausage with that?" As she wrote down his order, David noticed her handwriting. It was neat and careful, just like his daughter used to write when she was learning. Her letters. When she walked away to give the order to the cook, David immediately opened his phone and scrolled to a folder he rarely looked at anymore. It was labeled simply Lily. Inside was a single photo, the only one he had left after the custody battle. It showed a 5-year-old girl with dark hair and bright eyes wearing a yellow sundress. She was holding up her left wrist to the camera, showing off a Band-Aid. Underneath the Band-Aid was the crescent-shaped scar she had gotten when she fell off her bicycle in their backyard. David stared at the photo, then looked back at the waitress who was now serving coffee to another table. The resemblance was undeniable, but 18 years had passed. People change, features develop. But that scars don't lie. When she returned with his breakfast, David decided to ask more questions, but carefully. "I hope you don't mind me asking, but do you remember much from before you were adopted?" The young woman paused while setting down his plate. That's actually a really hard question. I don't remember much from before I was 5. The doctor said it was probably trauma from whatever happened before I was found. I only remember bits and pieces. Sometimes I have these dreams about a big house with a tire swing in the backyard, but I can never remember the details when I wake up. David's hands started shaking again. Their old house had a tire swing. He had built it himself when Lily was 4 years old, hanging it from the big oak tree in their backyard. She would spend hours on that swing, laughing and asking him to push her higher. A tire swing, David repeated quietly. Yeah, it's silly, but I've always loved tire swings because of those dreams. There's something comforting about them, even though I can't remember why. David could barely eat his breakfast. Every bite felt like swallowing sand. He kept stealing glances at the waitress as she moved around the diner, serving other customers, with the same warm smile and gentle manner. She helped an elderly man with his medication bottle, wiped down tables with care, and laughed genuinely at a trucker's joke. When she brought him his check, David noticed her name tag for the first time. It read Lisa. Not Lily, but close enough to make his heart ache. Lisa, he said softly. That's a beautiful name. Thank you. My grandmother chose it. She said I looked like a Lisa when they brought me to her. David paid for his breakfast and left a tip that was probably larger than what Lisa made in a day. As he stood to leave, he turned back to her. Lisa, I know this might sound strange, but have you ever thought about looking into your past? Finding out where you came from? Lisa's expression grew thoughtful. Sometimes. But honestly, I'm scared of what I might find. What if my birth parents didn't want me? What if there's a reason I was abandoned? My grandmother always told me that sometimes it's better to focus on the family you have rather than the family you lost. David nodded, understanding her fear but feeling his heart break a little more. Your grandmother sounds like a wise woman. She is. She's the strongest person I know. David walked toward the door, then stopped and turned back one more time. Lisa, take care of yourself. And if you ever do decide to look into your past, I hope you find the answers you're looking for. As David sat in his car in the diner parking lot, he couldn't bring himself to start the engine. His hands were still shaking as he called his assistant and canceled the Seattle meeting. There was no way he could focus on business today, not after what he had just experienced. He looked back at the photo on his phone, then at the diner where Lisa was still working, probably not giving their conversation another thought. But David couldn't stop thinking about it, about her, about the possibility that after 18 years of searching, of hiring investigators, of following dead-end leads, his daughter might have been right here all along, serving coffee and pancakes, in a small Oregon diner. The question now was what to do about it. How do you approach someone and tell them their entire life might be built on a lie? How do you explain that you've been looking for them for nearly 2 decades? And most importantly, how do you prove that the scar on a waitress's wrist might be the key to solving the biggest mystery of your life? David couldn't sleep that night. He had driven to a small motel just outside of town, instead of going to Seattle. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Lisa's face and that crescent-shaped scar. He kept telling himself he was being crazy, that it was just wishful thinking after all these years of searching. But deep down, he knew something was different about this encounter. The next morning, David found himself back at the diner. He told himself he just wanted coffee, but really he needed to see Lisa again, to study her movements, her expressions, anything that might confirm or deny his suspicions. Lisa greeted him with the same warm smile as the day before. You're back. Did your meeting go well? David felt guilty lying to her. It was postponed. I decided to stay in town for a few days. This seems like a peaceful place. It really is, Lisa agreed, pouring his coffee. Most people just pass through, on their way to somewhere bigger, but there's something special about small towns. People actually care about each other here. Throughout the morning, David watched Lisa work. She knew every customer by name. She remembered that Mr. Johnson liked his eggs over easy, that Mrs. Peterson needed her coffee extra hot because of her arthritis, and that the young construction worker at table 6 was saving money to propose to his girlfriend. Lisa had this natural way of making everyone feel important. During her break, Lisa sat at the counter and pulled out a worn paperback book. David noticed it was a mystery novel, and she was completely absorbed in it. When she looked up and caught him watching, she smiled sheepishly. "Sorry, I'm a bit of a bookworm. I've always loved mysteries and stories about people finding their families." "Silly, I know." David's heart skipped a beat. "Not silly at all. What's that one about?" "It's about a woman who discovers her whole life was a lie and she was actually kidnapped as a child. She has to piece together clues from her past to find her real family." Lisa paused and looked thoughtful. "Sometimes I wonder if my life is missing pieces like that." "What do you mean?" Lisa set down her book and stirred her coffee slowly. "Well, like I mentioned yesterday, I don't remember anything before I was 5. The social workers said I was found at a hospital in Seattle with no memory and no identification. They think I might have been in some kind of accident or trauma." David tried to keep his voice steady. "That must be difficult, not knowing where you came from." "It is sometimes. Especially when I have those dreams I told you about. They feel so real, but then they fade away like smoke." Lisa looked directly at David. "Can I tell you something strange? Ever since I met you yesterday, those dreams have been stronger. Last night I dreamed about a man reading me bedtime stories. He had a deep voice and he always did funny voices for the different characters. David felt like the air had been knocked out of his lungs. He used to read to Lily every night, and she would giggle when he did different voices for the animals in her favorite books. Her favorite was a story about a little rabbit who got lost in the woods but found her way home by following the stars." "That sounds like a nice memory," David managed to say. "The weird thing is, in the dream, the man was reading a story about a lost rabbit. I woke up with this song stuck in my head, something about following the starlight home." Lisa laughed. Softly. "I probably sound crazy." David's hands were shaking again. "Starlight, starlight, shining bright. Guide the little rabbit home tonight." The words came out before he could stop them. Lisa dropped her coffee spoon. It clattered on the counter as she stared at David in shock. How did you know those words?" "That's exactly what was in my head." David realized he had made a mistake. How could he explain that he knew those words because he had sung that song to his daughter every single night for the first 5 years of her life? He had made it up just for her. I think I heard it somewhere before," David said weakly, but Lisa was still staring at him with wide eyes. "No, that's not possible. I've never heard anyone else sing that song. I thought I made it up from my dreams." Lisa's voice was quiet now, almost scared. "Who are you really, and why do you know a song from my childhood memories?" Before David could answer, the diner's lunch rush started and Lisa had to get back to work. But David could see her glancing at him throughout the afternoon, questions written all over her. First evening, David made a phone call he had been avoiding for years. He called Robert, the private investigator who had worked on Lily's case when she first disappeared. Robert was retired now, but he had always told David to call if anything new came up. "David? I can't believe it. It's been, 5 years since we last talked?" Robert's voice was warm but surprised. "Robert, I need you to look into something for me. I think I might have found her." There was a long pause. "Found who?" "You mean Lily?" "Yes, there's a young woman about the right age adopted around the right time. She has the scar, Robert. The exact same scar." "David, we've been down this road before. You know how many false leads we followed over the years. This is different. She knows the song, Robert. The song I made up for Lily. She's been dreaming about it." Another pause, longer this time. "Where is she?" David told Robert everything about Lisa, about the diner, about their conversations. Robert listened without interrupting. "I'll look into it," Robert finally said. "But David, you need to be prepared. Even if this is Lily, 18 years have passed. She's not the same little girl you lost. She's a grown woman with her own life, her own family. I know. But I need to know the truth. I'll start with the adoption records and see what I can find. Give me a few days." Meanwhile, at the diner, Lisa was having her own conversation with her best friend Jenny, who also worked there as a cook. "I'm telling you, there's something weird about that guy," Lisa said, as they cleaned up after the dinner rush. "He keeps asking questions about my past, and somehow he knew a song I thought only existed in my dreams." Jenny, who was 5 years older and had always been protective of Lisa, frowned. "Maybe you should stay away from him. Rich guys in expensive suits don't just hang around small-town diners for days. But he doesn't seem dangerous. Just sad. Like he's lost something important." "Lisa, honey, you have the biggest heart in the world, but that doesn't mean you should trust every stranger who shows up." That night, Lisa went home to the small house she shared with her grandmother. Rose was 78 years old and had been the only mother figure Lisa really remembered. Rose was watching her evening game shows when Lisa came in looking troubled. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" Rose asked, turning down the TV volume. Lisa sat on the couch next to her grandmother. "Grandma, can I ask you something about when I first came to live with you?" Rose's expression became guarded. This was a topic they rarely discussed. "What do you want to know? Was there anything unusual about my adoption? Anything that didn't seem right?" Rose was quiet for a long moment. "Why are you asking this now?" "There's this man who's been coming to the diner. He seems to know things about my past, things I've never told anyone. It's making me wonder if there's more to my story than I know." Rose stood up slowly and walked to the window, looking out at the dark street. "Lisa, some stones are better left unturned. You have a good life here. You're safe. You're loved. Why risk all of that for answers that might only bring pain?" "Because I need to know who I am, Grandma. I need to know where I came from." Rose turned back to her granddaughter, and Lisa was surprised to see tears in the older woman's eyes. "If I tell you something, will you promise me you won't hate me?" Lisa's heart started beating faster. "Grandma, what are you talking about? I always suspected something wasn't right about your adoption. The paperwork came through too fast, and the agency wouldn't answer my questions. But I wanted a granddaughter, so badly after your mother died and you needed a home. I convinced myself it didn't matter how you came to me, only that you were here." Lisa felt like the ground was shifting under her feet. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that maybe it's time you found out the truth. But I'm also saying that no matter what you discover, you'll always be my granddaughter. Always." As Lisa lay in bed that night, she thought about the mysterious man at the diner, about her grandmother's confession, and about the dreams that seemed to be getting stronger every day. She had a feeling that her quiet life was about to change, forever, and she wasn't sure if she was ready for what she might discover. 3 days later, Robert called David with news that would change everything. David was sitting in his motel room staring at the business papers he couldn't concentrate on when his phone rang. "David, you need to sit down for this." Robert's voice was serious. "I'm already sitting. What did you find?" "I found the adoption agency that placed Lisa with the Chen family. It was called Loving Homes Adoption Services, and it was shut down by the FBI 15 years ago for running illegal operations." David's heart started pounding. "What kind of illegal operations?" "They were taking children from desperate situations and falsifying documents to place them with families who paid large amounts of money. But here's the thing, David. Not all the families knew the adoptions were illegal. Many thought they were going through legitimate channels." "What about Lisa's case specifically?" Robert took a deep breath. "According to the sealed records I managed to access, a 5-year-old girl matching Lisa's description was brought to them in June 2007. The paperwork shows she was placed with Thomas and Linda Chen, but there's no record of where she came from. Before that." David felt sick. June 2007. That's exactly when Lily disappeared. "There's more, David. I did some digging into your ex-wife Patricia's activities around that time. She had gotten involved with some very dangerous people because of her drug problems. I found evidence that she owed money to a man named Vincent Torres, who had connections to illegal adoption rings." David closed his eyes, remembering those final terrible months of his marriage. Patricia's addiction had gotten so bad that she would disappear for days. He had filed for full custody of Lily, and Patricia had become desperate and angry. "Are you saying Patricia sold our daughter?" I think Patricia was in an impossible situation. She owed money to dangerous people and they offered her a way out. The records suggest she was told Lily would go to a good family who really wanted a child. David felt anger rising in his chest, but also a deep sadness for his ex-wife. What happened to Patricia after that? She died of an overdose in 2010, David. 3 years after Lily disappeared. I think the guilt ate her alive. Meanwhile, Lisa was having her own revelations. After her conversation with Rose, she had started paying more attention to her dreams and fragmented memories. She began writing them down in a notebook, trying to piece together the puzzle of her past. The dreams were becoming clearer. She could see a large kitchen with yellow walls and a window that looked out onto a garden. She remembered a woman with blonde hair who seemed sad all the time, and a man who would carry her on his shoulders around the house. But the clearest memories were of bedtime stories and that song about the starlight. Lisa also remembered other things: the smell of a particular cologne, the sound of jazz music playing softly in the evenings, and a dog, a golden retriever who would sleep at the foot of her bed. She had always loved dogs, but Rose was allergic, so they never had pets. At work, Lisa found herself watching David whenever he came in. He had been coming to the diner every day for a week now, always ordering coffee and pancakes, always sitting at the same booth. She noticed he looked tired, like he wasn't sleeping well. Sometimes she caught him staring at her with an expression she couldn't quite understand. It wasn't creepy or inappropriate. It was more like he was trying to memorize her face. "You're going to wear a hole in the floor if you keep pacing like that," Jenny said during their afternoon break. Lisa stopped walking back and forth behind the counter. "I can't help it. Something big is happening. I can feel it." "Have you thought about just asking him directly? Walking up to his table and saying, 'Hey, why are you really here?'" Before Lisa could answer, David walked through the diner door, but this time he wasn't alone. An older man with gray hair was with him. They sat at David's usual booth, and Lisa could see them having a serious conversation. As Lisa approached their table with coffee, she overheard part of their discussion. "The DNA test would give us definitive proof," the gray-haired man was saying, "but how do I ask her for that?" "Excuse me, can I have some of your hair because I think you might be my long-lost daughter?" David replied. Lisa's hand started shaking as she poured their coffee. "DNA test, long-lost daughter?" She set the coffee pot down harder than she meant to, and both men looked up at her. "I'm sorry," Lisa said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I couldn't help but overhear." "Are you talking about me?" David and Robert exchanged glances. David looked like he wanted to disappear under the table. "Lisa, maybe you should sit down," David said gently. "I'm working. I can't just sit down in the middle of my shift." Robert checked his watch. "It's almost closing time. Why don't we wait until you're done and then we can all talk properly?" The next hour was the longest of Lisa's life. She kept making mistakes with orders, spilling things, and forgetting what customers had asked for. Jenny finally told her to go home early. "Whatever's going on with that guy, just deal with it. You're no good to anyone like this." Lisa untied her apron with shaking hands. She walked over to David's table where he and Robert were still sitting. "Okay," she said, sliding into the booth across from them. "I want to know what's going on. And I want the truth." David looked at Robert, who nodded encouragingly. "Lisa, this is going to sound impossible, but I think you might be my daughter. My daughter who disappeared 18 years ago." Lisa stared at him. "That's crazy. I was adopted as a baby. My parents died when I was 12. "No," David said softly. "Your adoptive parents died when you were 12, but before that you lived with me and my wife Patricia until you were 5 years old. Your name was Lily." "Lily," Lisa repeated, and something stirred in her memory. "I used to have dreams about someone calling me Lily." Robert leaned forward. "Lisa, do you remember anything about a golden retriever? A dog named Buddy?" Lisa's eyes widened. "Buddy. Oh my God, Buddy. He used to sleep on my bed." She looked at David with tears starting to form. "How could you possibly know that?" Because I was there, David said, his own voice breaking. I was the one who got Buddy for you when you turned 4. I was the one who sang you the Starlight song every night. I was the one who built the tire swing in our backyard. Lisa put her hands over her face. This can't be real. This stuff only happens in movies. Robert pulled out a folder. Lisa, I know this is overwhelming, but I have some information about what happened to you, about how you ended up being adopted by the Chen family. What kind of information? The adoption agency that placed you was running illegal operations. They were taking children from difficult situations and placing them with families for large sums of money. Your birth mother, Patricia, was struggling with addiction and owed money to dangerous people. Lisa looked up. Are you saying my mother sold me? David reached across the table but stopped short of touching her hand. I think your mother was desperate and scared. She made a terrible choice, but I don't think she understood what would happen. She died 3 years later, Lisa. I think she regretted what she did every day. Where were you? Why didn't you find me? I looked for you for years. I hired investigators, followed every lead, never stopped searching. But the illegal adoption network was very good at hiding their tracks. Your paperwork was falsified, your identity was changed, and you were moved to a different state. Lisa sat in silence for several minutes, processing everything she had just learned. Finally, she looked up at David. If you really are my father, prove it. Tell me something only a parent would know. David smiled sadly. You have a birthmark on your right shoulder blade. It's shaped like a tiny heart. You used to call it your love spot, and you would ask me to kiss it goodnight every night. Lisa's hand automatically went to her shoulder. She had always been self-conscious about that birthmark. Rose was the only other person who knew about it. And, David continued, you were afraid of thunderstorms, but you loved the rain. We used to sit on the porch during summer storms and count the seconds between lightning and thunder. Lisa started, crying then, not sad tears but confused, overwhelmed tears. I don't know what to do with this information. I don't know how to process it. You don't have to do anything right now, David said. But Lisa, if you're willing, we could do a DNA test, just to know for sure. Lisa wiped her eyes and looked at this man who claimed to be her father. Part of her wanted to run away and pretend this conversation never happened. But another part of her, the part that had always felt like something was missing, wanted to know the truth. Okay, she said finally. Let's find out who I really am. The DNA test results would take 5 days to come back. 5 days that felt like the longest week of both David and Lisa's lives. During that time, they met every afternoon at a small coffee shop away from the diner, sharing stories and trying to piece together the missing years. Lisa had taken time, off work, telling Jenny she needed to deal with a family emergency, which wasn't exactly a lie, she thought to herself. Jenny had hugged her and told her to take all the time she needed. On the 3rd day of waiting, David brought a small box with him to the coffee shop. His hands were shaking as he set it on the table between them. I brought some things that belong to you, he said quietly. I kept them all these years, hoping someday. Lisa stared at the box. It was just a simple cardboard shoebox, but somehow it felt like it contained the key to her entire past. What's in there? Pictures, your favorite stuffed animal, some drawings you made, the locket I gave you for your 4th birthday. With trembling fingers, Lisa opened the box. The first thing she saw was a small yellow elephant, worn and faded from years of hugging. The moment she touched it, a flood of memories came rushing back. She remembered carrying this elephant everywhere, talking to it when she was scared, using it as a pillow during car rides. Mr. Peanuts, she whispered, and then looked up at David in shock. I just remembered his name, Mr. Peanuts. David's eyes filled with tears. You named him that because you said his trunk looked like a peanut. You took him everywhere. Lisa hugged the elephant to her chest, and suddenly she could remember more things. Breakfast at a big wooden table, a woman making pancakes but looking sad, a man lifting her up to reach cookie jars on high shelves, playing in a sandbox in the IO backyard while music played from the house. Tell me about my mother, Lisa said. About Patricia. David's expression grew complicated. Patricia was beautiful and funny when I first met her. She had this laugh that could light up a room. But she got hurt in a car accident when you were 3, and the doctors gave her pain medication. That's how the addiction started. What was she like with me? She loved you so much, Lisa. Even when things got bad, she never stopped loving you. She would spend hours braiding your hair or teaching you songs. But the drugs changed her. She became someone I didn't recognize. Lisa pulled out a photograph from the box. It showed a little girl with pigtails sitting on a woman's lap. The woman had blonde hair and was smiling, but Lisa could see sadness in her eyes even in the picture. She looks like me, Lisa said softly. You have her smile, but you have my stubborn streak, David said with a weak laugh. The next item in the box was a small silver locket. When Lisa opened it, she found a tiny picture of herself as a toddler on one side and a picture of David and Patricia on the other. I gave this to you for your 4th birthday. You wore it every day until… David's voice trailed off. Until I disappeared. Lisa finished. She fastened the locket around her neck, and it felt like coming home. That evening, Lisa went home to Rose, with the shoebox tucked under her arm. Rose was in the kitchen making dinner when Lisa walked in. Grandma, we need to talk. Rose took one look at Lisa's face and the box in her arms, and her shoulders sagged. You found out, didn't you? Some of it. But I need to hear the rest from you. They sat at the kitchen table where they had shared thousands of meals together. Rose looked older than Lisa had ever seen her. Your grandfather and I tried for years to have children, Rose began. When Linda was finally born, she was our miracle. But then Linda and her husband died in that car accident, and I thought my heart would never heal. Lisa nodded. She knew this part of the story. A few months later, I got a call from an adoption agency. They said they had a 5-year-old girl who needed a home. They said her parents had died and she had nowhere to go. The fee was large, but I had insurance money from Linda's death. What made you suspicious? Rose wiped her eyes with a tissue. Everything happened so fast. Most adoptions take months or years, but this was done in 2 weeks. And when they brought you to me, you kept crying for your daddy. You said you wanted to go home. The social worker said it was normal, that you would adjust. But I never talked about my past after that. No, you stopped talking about it completely after a few weeks. The agency said that was normal too, that children often block out traumatic memories. I convinced myself that was what happened. Lisa reached across the table and took Rose's hand. What else, Grandma? What aren't you telling me? Rose got up and went to her bedroom. She came back with a small envelope. The social worker left this with me. She said it contained your medical records, but I was never supposed to open it unless you got seriously sick. Did you ever open it? Rose nodded shamefully. Last year, when you had pneumonia and were so sick, I opened it because I was scared the doctors needed your medical history. What was in it? There were no medical records, just a note with a phone number and the words, if anyone ever comes looking. I called the number, but it was disconnected. Lisa stared at the envelope. You've known for a year that something was wrong with my adoption? I was scared, Lisa. Scared that if I investigated, they would take you away from me. You're all I have left. Grandma, I'm 23 years old. No one can take me away from you. But what if your real family wants you back? What if they're rich and can give you a better life than I can? Lisa moved her chair closer to Rose and hugged her. Listen to me. You are my real family. David might be my biological father, but you're the one who raised me. You're the one who stayed up with me when I was sick, who helped me with homework, who taught me how to be a good person. Rose cried then, holding Lisa tight. I was so afraid you would hate me. I could never hate you. But Grandma, I need to know the truth about where I came from. Can you understand that? Rose nodded against Lisa's shoulder. What are you going to do? We did a DNA test. The results come back in 2 days. If David really is my father, then I'll have to figure out how to have both families in my life. The next morning, David was waiting at the coffee shop when Lisa arrived. She could tell by his expression that something had changed. The lab called, he said. The results are ready. They can email them to us right now if we want. Lisa sat down heavily. I thought I was ready for this, but now I'm terrified. What are you afraid of? If the test says you're not my father, then I'm back to square one, not knowing who I am. But if it says you are my father, then everything I thought I knew about my life is a lie. David reached across the table and touched her hand gently. Lisa, no matter what the test says, you are exactly who you're supposed to be. You're kind, hardworking, loyal, and strong. Those things don't change based on DNA. But what if I don't know how to be your daughter? I've been someone else for 18 years. Then we'll figure it out together. There's no instruction manual for this situation. Lisa took a deep breath. Okay, let's do it. David pulled out his phone and opened his email. Lisa moved her chair next to his so they could read the results together. David's hands were shaking as he opened the message from the lab. The words on the screen were simple and clear. Probability of paternity, 99.99%. Lisa stared at the screen for a long moment. Then she started laughing and crying at the same time. I can't believe it. After all these years of wondering who I am, I finally know. David was crying too. Lily, my little girl, I found you. I'm Lisa now, she said gently. I know you called me Lily, but I've been Lisa for 18 years. That's who I am. David nodded, understanding. Lisa, my daughter Lisa. They sat in the coffee shop for another hour, both of them trying to process what this meant for their lives. Lisa had a father. David had his daughter back. But they were also strangers who would have to learn how to love each other all over again. What happens now? Lisa asked. I don't know, David admitted. I've spent so many years imagining this moment, but I never thought about what comes after. I need time, Lisa said. This is overwhelming, and I need to figure out how to fit you into my life without losing the life I already have. I understand. I've waited 18 years. I can wait a little longer. As they prepared to leave, Lisa turned to David. Can I ask you something? Anything. Do you think my mother, Patricia, do you think she ever regretted what she did? David was quiet for a moment. I think she regretted it every day. I think that's part of what killed her in the end. Lisa nodded sadly. I wish I could tell her that I turned out okay, that I had a good life with Rose. Maybe she knows, David said softly. Maybe she's watching over you and she knows you became an amazing woman despite everything that happened. As Lisa walked home that evening, she felt like she was carrying the weight of 2 lifetimes. She was the same person she had always been, but now she knew where she came from. She had answers to questions that had haunted her dreams for years, but she also had new questions about what kind of relationship she wanted with David, and how to honor both the family that raised her and the family she had lost. 6 months had passed since the DNA test confirmed what both David and Lisa already knew in their hearts. The journey of rebuilding their relationship hadn't been easy, but it had been worth every difficult conversation and awkward moment. At first, they met once a week at the coffee shop. David would drive the 3 hours from Seattle to the small Oregon town, and they would spend the afternoon talking. Sometimes Lisa would share memories that had been coming back to her in pieces. Other times, David would tell her stories about her childhood that she couldn't remember. Slowly, Lisa began to see glimpses of the man who had been her father during those first 5 years of her life. David was patient and kind, never pushing her to remember more than she was ready for. He answered every question she had about Patricia, about their old house, about why he had never stopped looking for her. The hardest part for Lisa was learning about all the birthdays and holidays David had spent alone, never knowing if she was safe or happy. He had kept a photo of her on his desk for 18 years, aging it digitally every year to imagine what she might look like. He had never remarried, never had other children. He had spent his life building a successful business, but it had never filled the hole that losing her had left in his heart. I used to drive by playgrounds sometimes, David admitted during one of their visits, just hoping I might see a little Girl who looked like you. It sounds crazy now. It's not crazy, Lisa said softly. It's love. Rose had been nervous about meeting David at first. She was afraid he would be angry with her for keeping Lisa, or that he would try to take Lisa away. But when David finally came to dinner at their small house, he spent the evening thanking Rose for giving Lisa the loving home he couldn't provide. You saved her, David told Rose over dessert. You gave her stability and love when I couldn't even find her. I'll never be able to repay you for that. Rose cried that night, and Lisa realized it was the first time her grandmother had felt truly forgiven for the circumstances of the adoption. As winter turned to spring, David began visiting more often. He would stay at the local motel and spend entire weekends in town. Lisa introduced him to her friends at the diner, and gradually people stopped staring when he walked in. He became just another regular customer, except this one happened to be Lisa's newly found father. David also began helping Lisa think about her future. She had always wanted to go to college, but the cost seemed impossible on her diner wages. David offered to pay for her education, but Lisa was hesitant. I don't want your money, she said, during one of their conversations. I want to earn things for myself. This isn't charity, Lisa. This is a father wanting to help his daughter achieve her dreams. It's what I would have done if I had been there all along. After many discussions, Lisa agreed to let David help with her college expenses, but only if she could pay him back someday. They compromised on this point, with David secretly having no intention of ever accepting repayment. Lisa enrolled in the education program at the state university. She had always loved working with children and thought teaching would be perfect for her. She could commute to classes and still help take care of Rose. During her first semester, Lisa wrote a paper for her psychology class about family trauma and resilience. She interviewed both David and Rose for the project, learning even more about how her disappearance had affected everyone involved. The paper earned her highest marks, and her professor encouraged her to consider specializing in helping children who had experienced family separation. One evening in early summer, David brought Lisa to see their old house. He had kept it all these years, unable to bring himself to sell it. The tire swing was still hanging from the oak tree in the backyard, though it needed new rope. Lisa walked through the rooms slowly, touching walls and door frames. In what had been her bedroom, she found scratches on the door frame where David had marked her height as she grew. The last mark was labeled Lily, age 5, April 2007, just 2 months before she disappeared. I kept marking it, David said quietly. Even after you were gone, I would guess how tall you might be and make a mark every year on your birthday. Lisa looked at the door frame and saw marks going all the way up to where she stood now. The final mark was labeled Lily, age 23, and it was exactly her current height. That night, Lisa called Rose and told her about visiting the house. I remembered my room, Grandma. I remembered the nightlight that projected stars on the ceiling, and the bookshelf with all my picture books. Are you thinking about moving back there? Rose asked, trying to keep the worry out of her voice. No, Grandma. That was my childhood home, but our house is my real home. You're my family, too, and I'm not going anywhere. As Lisa's second semester began, she started volunteering at a local organization that helped reunite missing children with their families. David had suggested it, thinking her unique experience might help other families going through similar situations. Lisa found the work both difficult and rewarding. She met parents who had been searching for their children for years, and children who had been found but were struggling to reconnect with their biological families. She realized that her story, while painful, had actually had a relatively happy ending compared to many others. One afternoon, Lisa was working with a mother whose teenage son had been found after being missing for 10 years. The boy was angry and didn't want anything to do with his birth family. How do you make someone love you again when they don't even remember you? The mother asked Lisa desperately. You don't make them, Lisa said gently. You just keep showing up. You be patient and kind and let them decide how much of a relationship they want. Love isn't something you can force, but it's something you can demonstrate every day. Later that evening, Lisa called David and told him about the conversation. Is that what I did right? David asked. Just kept showing up? That's exactly what. You did right. You never pushed me to feel something I wasn't ready to feel. You let me set the pace. I was so afraid of losing you again that I probably would have agreed to anything. Well, it worked. I love you, Dad. It was the first time Lisa had called him Dad, and David had to pull over to the side of the road because he was crying too hard to drive safely. The following spring, Lisa graduated from college with honors. Both David and Rose sat in the audience at her graduation ceremony, along with Jenny from the diner and several other friends who had become like family over the years. At the graduation party Rose hosted at their house, David stood up to make a speech. 2 years ago, I was a man who had everything money could buy, but nothing that really mattered. I had given up hope of ever seeing my daughter again. Then I walked into a small diner and met a waitress who changed my life forever. He looked at Lisa, who was sitting between Rose and her college roommate. Lisa, you could have been angry when you learned the truth about your past. You could have blamed me for not finding you sooner, or blamed Rose for keeping you, or blamed your mother for the choices she made. Instead, you chose to build bridges. You chose love over anger, forgiveness over resentment. David paused, looking around the room at all the people who loved Lisa. Today, I'm not just proud of your academic achievements. I'm proud of the woman you've become. You're kind, strong, compassionate, and wise. You're everything I dreamed you might become and more than I ever dared to hope for, too. Lisa wiped tears from her eyes as the room erupted in applause. Later that evening, after the guests had gone home and Rose had gone to bed, Lisa and David sat on the front porch looking at the stars. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't stopped at that diner? Lisa asked. Every day, David admitted. But I've learned not to focus on the what-ifs. We found each other when we were supposed to find each other. I've been thinking about something, Lisa said. I want to start a foundation to help families like ours. Families dealing with illegal adoptions, missing children, all of it. David smiled. I think that's a wonderful idea. What would you call it? Lisa looked up at the stars, remembering the lullaby that had brought them back together. The Starlight Foundation, because sometimes when you're lost, you need something to guide you home. 3 months later, the Starlight Foundation opened its doors. Lisa worked as the program director while finishing her master's degree in family counseling. David provided the funding and used his business connections to raise awareness about illegal adoption practices. Rose, despite being in her 80s, volunteered at the foundation twice a week, using her experience as an adoptive parent to counsel families navigating the complex emotions of reunion. The foundation's first success story was reuniting a mother with her son who had been missing for 8 years. When Lisa saw them embrace for the first time, she thought about her own journey and realized that sometimes the most broken things can become the most beautiful when they're put back together with love and patience. On quiet evenings, Lisa would sometimes visit David's house and sit on the old tire swing. She would think about the little girl who had once played in that yard, and the woman she had become because of the journey that followed. Her life had been shaped by loss and separation, but ultimately defined by love, resilience, and the power of never giving up hope. The scar on her wrist had faded over the years, but it was still there, a small reminder of childhood innocence and the moment that would eventually lead her home. Sometimes the most important journeys begin with the smallest signs, and sometimes coming home means learning that you can belong to more than one family, in more than one way, all at the same time.